To me, I will always tell parents, put your oxygen mask on first. Even though you're going through a very difficult time, even though it's taking time, energy, resources, do not forget each other.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for the Not By Chance podcast. And today I'm really excited to be able to introduce a good friend of mine and someone I look up to a lot in this field, Mike Gurr. He's been in the mental health industry for 23 years. He's currently the Chief Clinical Officer at Emotacare, and that's an RTC up in northern Arizona. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And there's outpatient, respite levels of care, and you work with adolescents.
Yes.
That's always been your specialty, Mike, working with adolescents. You happen to, I think you're kind of a kid in a way, and at heart, you have fun. I still remember snowball fights with you and things
I
like
do
that.
remember that. Yes, yes.
I think we can relate to each other on the playful side. You also come to us with a lot of experience with parents and training parents along the way. So you've done a lot of workshops over the years, and so we're going to hope to tap into some of the vast amounts of knowledge you have. I was sharing with you a little bit before we started that our audience is generally parents who have teenagers, and maybe teenagers that have been difficult or challenging, and that have struggled in their life. In some cases, these are parents that have a child in an RTC, or they've had therapy. And you've had a lot of experience over the years working inside residential treatment centers and understand that. So we're going to probably do an array of different topics today. But there's something that you mentioned that I thought was sort of foundational that we could begin on, and that is that marriage is something really important to you, and you have a passion for that. And I'd like to start there if we can. And maybe you could talk to me a little bit about your thoughts about marriage, setting the tone for the home, setting the culture, starting with that marriage. And what's some of the thoughts that come to mind as I point you towards that as the foundation?
Well, first, Tim, it's great to be with you. I mean, I think we've known each other, I don't know, 18, 19, I don't know, a long time. So again, somebody I look up to as well in this industry. So I appreciate being on with you and talking about some fun topics. When I think back, way back when I was going to school, people asked me, who did I want to work with? And one population that always would come up, and it would change, but one was always families, right? Mm-hmm. That was always a population that I was passionate about. And luckily in my career, I've been able to work with thousands of families from around the world. So I've been blessed to be able to learn from families, as you said, train, teach families. And obviously the core at any family is the parent, the parental unit. And so, to me, one, as you were actually talking, I literally had one story that popped into my mind I wanted to share in regards to the importance of the marriage, and especially when, you have a kiddo that starts to struggle. And, when I would have parents come to my various workshops, there was not one parent that was preparing for their kid to struggle, right? There was not one parenting group saying, oh yeah, you know what, I set aside this amount of money because I knew that my kid was going to be struggling when they were a teenager. Yeah. Most of them obviously did not prepare for this. And this is where I go way back, right? I've used this analogy really my whole career, is that when you're on an airplane and they're walking you through, right, the emergency procedures, and they talk about that if there's going to be a sudden decrease in cabin pressure, now we don't expect it, but if there is one, it tells us to put the oxygen mask on your face first, and then if you have little children or older people, you put it on them second. And I've always used that analogy with parents because when your kiddo starts to struggle, that is that sudden decrease in cabin pressure you did not expect.
Mm.
This was not something that you were planning on. And what's interesting is a lot of times when it happens, the parents will put all of their time and energy into that kid, which is understandable, right? Because a lot of times that their kiddo is really, really struggling. And so a lot of time and energy goes into that kid. What I have found is as that starts to happen, time and energy now is taken away from the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like we're going to put the oxygen mask on our kid first and kind of forget about ourselves. So over the years, I have seen marriages do one of two things as they face this really, really tough time. I've seen marriages get stronger, but I've also seen marriages get blown apart, right? And then going through the exact same thing. So to me, I will always tell parents, put your oxygen mask on first. Even though you're going through a very difficult time, even though it's taking time, energy, resources, do not forget each other, right? Nurture, nourish that relationship. And this is something that has stood out to me for so many years. I was working with a family from Hawaii, and their daughter had been in my program probably for about 14 months. And they had come to every workshop, every seminar, and their daughter actually had done very well. And they were coming to the final workshop where the entire family was together. We were getting them ready to go home. And we were just reviewing some different tools and skills that they had learned with us. And we were on a break, and the dad came up to me. His name was Tommy. And he said, "Mike, we blew it." And I was like, "Whoa, wait, what do you mean we blew it? You've been with us for 14 months. You know, it looks like everything's going so well. And now, literally the last week that you're in treatment, you say we blew it? Like, what are you talking about?" And he says, "Mike," he goes, "you know what? When I'm just with my daughter, things are good. When my wife's just with my daughter, things are good. When we're all together, things are horrible. They're right back to where they were." And he goes, "I finally realized we missed the boat." And I'm like, "Tommy, what are you talking about?" And you guys, we have been working so hard on ourselves and our relationship with our daughter. We have not worked on each other. We have not worked on our relationship.
Mm.
So when we all get back together, our daughter sees ways that she can divide and conquer, ways that she can manipulate, because our relationship did not get stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And that has stuck with me. And that probably, Tim, that interaction probably happened, I don't know, like 16, 17 years. I mean, it was a long time ago, but it has stuck with me because they have done so much work, but they did forget, they did neglect that relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
They neglected their marriage. And so I have been such a proponent, do not forget that the strength of your relationship, the strength of your marriage will both have a direct and indirect impact, right, on your ability to navigate, to parent these very difficult situations, right? So to me, when you're talking about the importance of marriage, those are some of the thoughts that come to my mind, is because it can be forgotten, it can be neglected. And I'll even say this, Tim, in where I'm at in life now, is we just have one kid left at our house. We're getting close to being an empty nester. I don't know about you, but I'm starting to see couples that have been together 25 plus years get a divorce.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting. And I've been talking to people about it. And what they've said is, "Mike, we have spent so much," again, and this isn't really even families where a kid got sent away. Just, we're just going through life. But now the kids are out of the house and the couples look at each other and they're like, "Who are you?
Exactly.
Do I even like you?
Yeah.
I don't even know who you are.
Yeah.
Do we even like the same things?" And so it's been a wake-up call just for me to be like, do I know my wife? do we like each other? Do we
So
like the
true.
same things? And so it's been a wake up call to make sure that I'm nurturing, right, that relationship,
Hmm.
because when the kids are out of the house, guess what? That's all you got, man. Right? That's all you have
That's it.
is
That's
each
it.
other. So anyway, I could go on and on, but those are some of
No,
my
I
initial
I
thoughts
love
on that.
it, Mike. I mean, a few things came to my mind as you were talking about that. I remember when we had our first child, our first baby, and I was in my master's program in marriage and family therapy, and so I was studying about family systems, and I was, somewhat aware of patterns that you can start that later you need to change, or maybe patterns that if you knew better, you would never start in the first place. But so in the middle of that, we have this little baby. And all of a sudden, I noticed that it was like 2 months of me kissing one cheek and her kissing the other cheek of this little baby. And just one day we sort of look at each other like, oh, hi. Like we had pretty much lost focus on each other. We were
Yeah.
so enamored with this little baby. And I literally, by the way, one of my professors during that time, I'd lost focus on everything, including school. She came to me, and as we're walking down the hall, she says, Tim, what can I do to invite you back to graduate school? And then I realized, oh, I've got to attend to a few other things here. But that's even more the case when you start to create, there starts to become some pain and pressure on the family system. And I'm actually working with a family that, is definitely the parental concerns was the issue, parent and teen and struggling teen, and that they came with. But really, as we got into it, it was much more about their relationship.
Yep.
And we're finding that as we address that, some of these other things disappear in
Yeah.
terms of the parenting teen dynamic changes. So I
Yep.
100% agree with you that I pictured for the very first time as you were sharing that metaphor. I think we've all heard, but I saw it differently this time than I've ever seen it. I I've always saw it as me putting the mask on myself. And what I saw then is me putting the mask on my marriage and
Yeah.
our co-parenting sort of life, making sure that that's healthy.
Right.
So that's a powerful idea. The there definitely is a risk of losing track of that, thinking there's something more important. Certainly, the the child, that there's a crisis going on, and it's easy to
Yeah.
take our attention that direction. Why do you think? Let's get down to maybe a principle that, and maybe it's a family systems principle or some other principle, but what is it about putting the oxygen on the marriage or on your co-parenting relationship first? What is it that makes that work in the end and be more effective than if you don't do that?
I would say number one of the biggest tools that parents have that I think sometimes we forget is modeling.
Mm.
I can teach parents a lot of skills, a lot of tools. And the old adage comes back to me is I would rather see a sermon than hear one any day.
Hmm.
And, to me, our kids are watching us and more than we know. I mean, I think when our kids are little, it's very obvious that they're watching us because they mimic. I mean, it is like a little mirror walking around. And if you say a bad word, well, tomorrow they're saying that bad word. You're like, where did you hear that bad word? Oh, that was from me, right? So, but to me, as they get older, I think sometimes we forget they are still watching us, and seeing how we are treating each other as
Hmm.
husband and wife, how we are handling conflict, how we are going through resolution, how we handle a bad day,
Hmm.
honestly, right? How
Hmm.
we handle, rejection, how we handle failure, all of these things that happen to us, and especially in our marriages, our kids are taking a really, really close look at that. And so to me, when now you have a kid in treatment, I cannot tell you how many times a kid's been in my office and said, Mike, I don't know why I need to do this work. Nothing's going to change at home.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I'm sitting here working my butt off when my parents aren't doing anything, or they just think I'm the problem,
Yeah.
right? Why should I do this work? And there's a part of me, I'm like, well, control the controllable, like the whole adage, you've been in that situation as well. You try to get the kid, to focus on what they can control and, do your work. But, what struck me as I had this conversation with hundreds of kids, the importance of modeling. That I've also had kids come into my office say, man, you know what? I see my parents doing the work, right? I see my parents showing
Mm-hmm.
up.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that means they've gotten their own therapist, whether that means they are engaged in the program, whatever that looks like, but that makes such a huge difference when the work is being modeled, right?
Absolutely.
And that speaks volumes. And I will say this back to the environment. I've been in homes. I've walked in a home. And I still remember I walked in a home in Florida. A girl just got out of residential treatment programming. I walked in that first night. I'm just kind of getting to know the family. And for lack of a better word, when I left the home, I felt dirty because there was not a healthy structure. There wasn't boundaries. People were dropping F-bombs against each other. The parents were, I mean, I couldn't believe what I'd walked into. And and again, people don't know me, but I'm a very direct person. I came back the next day and I told the parents, I go, I've been doing this a long time. Your family is absolutely the worst family that I've ever been a part of. And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah, let me tell you why. I'm here to
They
help, but
needed a
you
mirror.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, let me tell you why. And so to me, the environment of the home begins with the
Mm.
marriage.
Yes.
And, if that is strong, and I think you mentioned this before, if that is strong, that is the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And if I have a solid foundation, that foundation can withstand some pretty tough things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if it's a strong foundation as we're going through trial and struggle, it actually allows me to get stronger because of the trial and struggle versus right the other way. So to me, that would be a principle that I think comes to my mind first is just the power and the importance of modeling.
Yes. And I would say what you experienced in Florida was it was a culture that
Yeah.
had been created by these kinds of interactions over time, the intentionality or lack of intentionality, the is almost chaos. It sounds like it in some ways in terms of values, in terms of structure and security, things like that. And so over time, the patterns we set, the modeling we give, creates a culture.
Yeah.
And if you think about wanting to have influence over the life cycle as parents, and you might think that when they're 18 they're done being influenced, but that's not true. They're
Right.
going to continue to be influenced no matter what the culture is that we've created. That culture will continue to influence them. It'll either be an inviting culture to kind of step up and in a higher level, higher plane, or it's going to be probably a destructive culture, keeping them probably unable to move forward in some ways. And
Well, and real quick, Tim, sorry to interrupt, but our oldest son, he's married, and they just had their first child about a year and a half ago. But it was really interesting. I mean, they knew they were attempting to get pregnant. We didn't know that, but they called us, my wife and I, one day, and they said, "Can we ask you some questions?" And we're like, "Sure." And they're like, "We would like to ask you about parenting." And again, they didn't say, "Hey, we're trying to get pregnant." We didn't know that. But my daughter-in-law, and again, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I want to answer I think what you said, this resonates. She says, Mike, I see how you raised your son. I see how you and your wife have raised your family, and now I can see how my parents raised me and my siblings, and I want our kids to be raised in the culture that your son came from. And that just struck, I didn't even think about that, right? To
Hmm.
your point is you're so focused on creating that environment for your immediate family, your kids. But now I'm like, oh my gosh, like she wants to create that for her kiddo, which will be my well, they had a son, just surprise. Like, so, right, for my grandson. And we literally talked to them for probably about an hour and a half. They had some very just genuine questions. My wife and I sat with them, and there's a part of me, I even told my wife, I go, that felt almost sacred,
Hmm.
that we were having these conversations of parenting and the importance of it. And they wanted, right? They understood that. And for me to feel like, wow, maybe, just maybe, my influence, my wife's influence may now carry over to that next generation was almost, again, to me, I just never thought about that,
It's a
right? It's kind of
powerful.
mind blowing. It's really, really cool. So, yes, the idea of the impact that parents can have, not just in their own home, but it can reach out
Hmm.
again to that generation. Anyway, that just came to my mind
Yeah,
as well.
that's amazing, and something we hope will happen as people intersect with our kids, our family system, our culture. I tell Roxanne all the time she makes being a Thayne cool. Um, and I do think there's something she adds to our family culture that is like a glue. It's like an attractant, that the kids as they become adults want to come back to, and things like that. So and we have no idea how powerful that culture is. I want to say to the parents out there that are like, yeah, our culture's messed up. I want to say, as you bring in a new true principle into your family, and as you focus on really living that out, or a value system, or something that helps stabilize or give direction, uh, that changes the culture. And
Yeah,
and the more you persist in that over time, so it's not too late actually to adjust the culture. It's just hard if you don't understand you're living in a culture. And
right.
I think for your daughter-in-law, the neat thing is now she has another data point. It's like, okay,
Yeah,
I have this experience. Now I can kind of have an inside peek into another family culture. And there's so much I like about that. And I'm actually hoping, I actually better not say this, but I want my kids, I want, I want my kids to have enough data points in terms of dating that
yeah,
they can really be choosy and make a good decision. But that's important in terms of letting people know out there that all of us have struggled somewhere along the line, and we've had to kind of find in ourselves what's our direction. And I think about why are older people, why do they tend to have this wisdom? And I think it's because they've got this lifespan now knowledge of maybe 70 years of watching things play out, that they recognize truth. They
yeah,
recognize things that work and things that don't work. And they also seem to have, in many cases, patience in the process, because they know that this life will kind of teach us a lot of things. And
yeah.
and over time we'll learn the more important things. If we're watchful, kind of have our eyes open, we'll learn what we need to. If you're tired of having power struggles with your teen over freedoms and privileges, put the ball in their court and have them create a plan for how they're going to earn back that freedom. We've got a tool for you. It's free. You can find it at trustandfreedom.trusty.com. You can find that in the description below. When you think about the lifespan, the parent's role really does change. Uh, In the beginning, we got a brand new baby in our family now. Our daughter and her husband had a little baby just last week, and they live in our house, and it's been fun. Um, and so everything is taken care of. All he does is eat, sleep, and mess his diaper up, so we have to change it. I mean, those three things, but it's just we're taking care of every detail, and we're
Right.
controlling every detail of his life. And over time, obviously, there is a real like identity formed in this little guy, and over time, he's going to start to want to be himself and have autonomy. And that's the disruption that all of us have experienced. Where all of a sudden maybe your daughter doesn't want to give you a hug in public, and for the first time you're like, what? or or whatever it is, you know. And in time, our influence really changes. And I think back on the point we were just making about culture. You know, you'll have much less direct influence. Um, our son, who's now 26, he told us the other night something that was kind of mind blowing to me, because I felt like at that point in time maybe our job was done in a lot of ways, and maybe we didn't have any influence. And he told us in a very sincere moment, he says, we're never going to need, or not, we're never not going to need your influence.
Right.
And we're always going to be open to your influence. And we were just humbled because
Yeah.
that's what we hope for. And he's honored us that way and allowing us to
Yeah.
continue to influence him, but it's a very different kind of influence.
Yes.
What
Yeah.
would you say about the shift there between sort of this control period of time and then the letting go and what takes over?
Yeah.
What's the influence after that?
So I like to go back to a chart that I would do in my workshops. I called it the inverted triangle, and because a lot of times parents would parent from the triangle. So really, the inverted triangle is this: is that when your children are small, to your point, Tim, they don't know. I mean, literally, they don't know. And so in those moments, you are being very direct. I mean, very direct, very black and white. And if you wanted to, you could probably do almost 24/7 teaching. You have opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. Now, the goal, again, is to create a foundation, or to your point, maybe even a culture that they have been given what we would call just truth, right? Before you go across the street, you stop. You look both. I mean, just simple truths, right? Right and wrong. But in the beginning, right? And I would say probably from like, 0 to 7, 0 to 8-ish, you're going to be pretty direct as parents, or that's what I teach, right? Because again, they don't know.
They need
And
to
this
know.
is where, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and this is where you are teaching values, right? This is where you are teaching principles to create a foundation for them to now, as they go out and experience the world, they get to start putting that right in place. So then, that next piece is, okay, let's go maybe between 9 and 12, or that prepubescence. Is, to me, this is where a parent starts to begin to give choice, not just full outright do whatever you want, but you want your kids to start experiencing the ability to choose, make mistakes, learn from mistakes. So
Mm-hmm.
again, you're still teaching, but it's not always as direct, if that makes sense. I mean, there's still some directness, but you're starting, again, that inverted V is starting to widen a little bit. Now, as I get into those teenage years, this is a struggle because, to your point, Tim, I remember coming home from work and all my kids would run up and give me a hug. And I started to see that as my kids got older, I would get home from work, there was one less person giving me a hug, and then two less people giving me a hug, and then three less. I mean, so, right, it starts to shift. You're like, well, dang, like what's going on? I miss those hugs. So to me, in adolescence, it's very, very difficult because there's so much going on. There's hormonal things going on. There's independence going on. There's a lot of development in an adolescent, physically, emotionally, mentally, just biologically. And so as a parent, sometimes it's hard because you still want to increase, right, that inverted triangle. You still now want them to even have more opportunity to make decisions, right? You want to give them, and I like to always say that, okay, I have guardrails. I'm not just like, hey, do whatever you want. I want to have that structure. I want to have guardrails, but I also want to be able as a parent to be allowing them to kind of bounce back and forth, that they may not make a great decision. And as a parent, can I be okay with them maybe not getting all A's, maybe getting fired from a job, maybe getting out of a relationship, whatever it is? But to me, that's where a lot of the teaching, and I have to be intentional as a parent because as my kids get older, the opportunities get further and further apart, right? When they were little, I could be teaching all day long. But now as they are getting older, the opportunity of those teaching moments, if I'm not paying attention, will start to diminish, and I could miss that. And I will say this, as you are being really focused on each of your kids, where they're at, what they need, and paying attention to those teaching opportunities, I will say that you can have some really, really cool conversations, right, as they are getting older, because as their brains are starting to mature and develop, you can have some really neat conversations. I still remember one day, my 17-year-old son, who I used to be taller than, we were having a conversation. He stands up and I'm looking at him. And just the conversation we had, I'm like, wow, when did you turn into this young adult who we can now have an adult conversation? And so to me, I've seen a lot of parents do the opposite, right? As their kids become these adolescents and they're starting to have struggles, they actually tighten up everything, right? They don't allow the kids to start finding themselves, practicing, again, learning, understanding. And the more I've seen parents tighten in adolescence, they rebel, quite
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah, and you know, it's understandable that parents find themselves in that kind of pattern because they, you know, at the very time you're supposed to sort of loosen the reins, so to speak,
Right.
they start taking bigger risks. And on top of
Absolutely. Yeah.
that, they're also being a little more snarky and a little less lovable. And
Yeah.
so they're triggering, you know, some emotions, both of fear and frustration and anger, and you know those kinds of things are coming, you know, coming with it. So you got these strong emotions they're feeling of this independence. They're
Yep.
making dumb decisions. You're recognizing that, and some of them you scratch your head and like, why are they destroying that?
Yeah.
Because oh, they're mad at me. You know, this is where they can get their independence. They're going to just get it one way or the other. And so it's easy
Right.
for parents to get into a power struggle with a
Yeah.
teen trying to get their power and not doing it very well. And so you're trying to offset their bad reasoning. I mean, there's lots of reasons we could get stuck in the cycle of you know, clamping down at the very time
Right.
that we
Yeah.
really should be opening it up.
Well, and that's one thing so I mean, this whole thing, you know, this inverted triangle, and you know, to your point, eventually they will leave the house. And that's a whole weird experience because I still like my oldest, I've had very unique conversations, and I told him, listen, Talmadge, everything you do is a first for me as a parent. It's a first, right? You're our guinea pig. And so, you know, as he moved away from college, I even said, you know, I don't want to smother you. Like, how often do you want me to call you? Like, how often do we want to check in or do we not want to check in? Like, I don't know. Like, I've never done this before. So, you know, I've really been just honest with him. You know, like, I don't know everything. You're the first of, you know, the first one to get married, the first one to have a grandkid. So, you know, even that kind of a conversation is now I've got these, well, they're not my in-laws, but his in-laws, right? I've got to share you with somebody. So I get you for Thanksgiving one year and they get you for Thanksgiving another year. So I mean, so all of these things are so new. It's like, what do I do as a parent and how do I parent that? Because I still am your parent, but I understand, right? You have your life. So to me, I'm going to go back to a core principle that I try to live and I try to teach all the parents that I have been blessed to interact with is, you know what, you can be the best teacher, have the best skills, read all of the books, go to every class you can, have all the tools, you can do have all of that. But if you don't have a relationship with your son or daughter, all of those will be rendered very, very ineffective.
Yeah.
And so I really tried to focus in on, and depending on the age of your kid, depending on obviously what they're doing, I still want to protect the relationship.
Hmm.
I still want to nurture and strengthen the relationship, even if it's something really, really small. Because you never know, to your point, Tim, you had that cool interaction with your son at 26. You never know when they will come back and they will need you or they will need that influence or you'll have that influence. So to me, don't ever underestimate the power of doing little things to strengthen the relationship. Because to me, you're putting in kind of these deposits, if you will, that hopefully you'll have withdrawals really for the rest of their life. Because even right now, you know, my oldest son, again, married, has his own kid, but we still have some pretty cool conversations. And I have to say I attribute that because of the relationship,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And so I think to me the relationship is that key piece that if you have that, when you then have your conversations, you're teaching, you're listening, you're being direct, whatever it is, all of those behaviors, skills, tools, whatever it is, will be much more effective if that makes sense
I
in the
got
relationship.
it makes 100% sense, and I've got a question.
Yeah.
Where does respect fall in this sort of mix of ingredients to a relationship that has continues to have influence?
So that's it. Wow, that's a it's a huge question. The reason I say it's a huge question is because as I've done a lot of work with families, and whether it's values work that I do, whether it's a family structure, you know, with family rules or whatever it is, that topic. And again, I try not to use absolutes a lot, but that always comes up. The idea of respect, right, in a relationship. And the reason I laugh is because the definition of respect, if I'm working with a family of six, I could have six different definitions of what respect is.
Yeah, and it's
So,
respect. It's coming in both ways too. You know, if you think about a teenager, one of the most important things they need to feel is that you respect them.
yeah,
And what we tend to do as parents is we want respect, you know,
yeah,
from them.
demand it. Yeah,
Yes, but what they want is to be respected. And, you know, trusting them maybe a little more than you think you should is one way to let them know you respect them. You believe in them. You believe that
right.
they can handle more. And that means a lot to them. And then on the other side, um, you know, trying to live our lives in a way that we can be respected. You
Right.
know, so it's not just, oh, I'm gonna, you know, be buddy buddy with my young adult. Maybe there's an ingredient of that too, but what if they don't really look to you, up to you, and say, I aspire in some ways in my life to be more like that. I hope I can
Right.
do that someday. I feel like that's another piece of this that we don't talk a lot about, you know, because
Yeah.
we sort of just talk about, hey, connect.
Yeah. So yeah, and what I would say, Tim, I love it, is my first approach or my first thing I would do with a family is I would define it. Like, I need to know how you guys look at respect. What even is it to you, right, as parents? What is it to you as the kids? And then as siblings. And I go, so once you define it for me, then we can start talking about what is it going to look like in this family, right? So that's number one, is let's define it, right? What are we actually talking about when we use this general word respect? Now, once we've defined it, here's what I'll tell people. I cannot tell you how many times I have heard from a kiddo, well, my parents don't respect me, so I'm not going to respect them. And I've heard it from the parents. Well, they don't give me respect. Why? I mean, I'm like, oh, what are we, 2 years old? Like, what are we doing here?
Mm-hmm.
So what I'll tell people is after I've defined it, I say, now I want you to own it, right? And it goes back to, I used to do a lot of work with athletes, and one of the primary principles there is control the controllables. And so I'll tell the family, I want you to have a mindset and ask yourself, what's my part? I want everybody in this house to have the mindset of what's my part, because that is controlling the controllable, which is you. Don't sit here and be acted upon, right? Don't let other people dictate what you do or do not. I go, that is a very powerless position to put yourself in. And I go, and you deserve better, and you're better than that, quite honestly. So now we've got this definition, let's own it, right? So instead of like, well, if you do this, then I will do this. I go, don't do that. I go, my goal, right, as your coach is to empower you to make a choice. Regardless of what's happening to you, around you, you still get to choose. And in this case, we're talking about respect, right? So regardless, choose respect. And here's what I have found. As I am being respectful, guess what I invite? It doesn't guarantee it, because other people can make their choice as well, but it invites respect back.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, that's kind of how I work with that in a family is number one, let's define it so we know really what we're even talking about. And then two, each individual own it, right? What's my part? And feel empowered to be like, I will make this choice. So anyway, I don't know
I
if that
love
makes
it.
sense, but
Oh, it
that's,
makes a
yeah.
ton of sense, Mike. What I like about that is that it gets back to almost the modeling you talked about. You know, especially if a parent says, "Okay, I'm going to be the one to interject this feeling of respect in our family's culture and system, and I'm going to be the one to do this in the right way, this respectful way." What that does, it models, like you said, and
Yeah.
probably invites everyone else in the family to follow suit. Doesn't guarantee it, but it certainly is an invitation. And over time, you can't help but respect someone that you're watching grow as an individual. You're watching. I have my parents are getting quite old, and when my son told me, "You'll never stop influencing us," you know,
Yeah.
I immediately went to the next generation up, and I'm like, yeah, here I am, late 50s, and I am absolutely learning from my parents right now
Yeah.
because I'm watching them continue to evolve and improve in ways, and their health is declining, but their character is enhancing.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there watching this, and I don't think I've ever felt more respect
Yeah.
and connection to my parents than I do right now. And a real sadness thinking about losing them.
Right.
And
Right.
it's because of this. I think them being the two people in my life that I can look to and said to myself, look at how they're continuing to strive and overcome and recognize weaknesses over time, and they're just getting better. And it makes me kind of want to follow suit. So I love the
Right.
combination of bringing in the idea of respect into the idea of building a relationship, because they go hand in hand. It's really
Yes.
hard if a family system doesn't have any of that in it, kind of like what you're talking about, that the family system in Florida,
Yeah.
there's really not a basis.
Zero respect.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
there
zero
is.
respect, and there's no basis for a really
Yeah.
solid relationship, right? It's like,
Yeah.
where do you begin if you don't have that? Well, I want to pivot
Yep.
just a little bit to end
Yeah.
to thinking about our parents who have a child in a treatment program, and how some of these principles might come into play. You know, one of the things you mentioned is that treatment is not the end, it's the beginning. And I would like to
Right.
say that there's in all of this journey that they've been through and the hardships that they've had to deal with, some of the most difficult, choices a parent ever has to make would be what they've had to do in their
Yeah.
journey. Uh, all of that may sound like, oh, I just really got a tough situation. But I would say at the end of treatment, you can look at this as almost a reset. Yes, it's not the end, but it's the beginning of what really matters next, and that you've got a chance to very intentionally put the things in place that you need to in order for a better outcome, a different family culture. So that's what
Right.
I love the story you told at the beginning of this man saying, we blew it, because he's
Yeah.
realizing she's coming home, and realizing that, oh, our culture in our marriage or this co-parenting hasn't really changed. So there's all of that you can be doing if you're a parent, working on that context. Because what is the context? It's not really just the physical environment. It's the culture.
Right.
It's the communication between you and your co-parent. And so I see it as this window of opportunity that most parents never have because they haven't had a
Right.
break from it and time to really educate themselves, and then almost a game plan to do something very different coming out of that.
Right. One thing I would say is I knew families were going to be okay when they left treatment, and I heard these words: I would not wish this on my worst enemy.
Mm-hmm.
I would not wish this journey that we've been on my worst enemy, but I am very grateful for
Yeah.
this journey that we have been on, because it has strengthened us in ways we never would have been strengthened. It has given us awareness of things we never would have been aware of.
Mm-hmm.
We have tools and skills that never would have come into, right, our mind to use, how to use, when to use it. And so to me, that perspective, and I think that's a powerful piece, right, is the perspective they had on the journey. Now, to your point, Tim, is once they have left that, the journey has not stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And in some instances, I'll say this to parents, the journey truly has just begun. The work that you did in the program or during treatment, again, goes back to, it creates a foundation, right? It creates this jumping off point that I've seen too many families when they get out of treatment. And and this is, I've made this up. I don't think anybody's trademarked this, but I call it the deep breath syndrome. Is they get out of treatment and they're like, oh man, like that was hard. Like we did a ton, and patting themselves on the back.
Mm-hmm.
And in that deep breath, they stop.
Yeah.
They stop the very things that got them right to this point. And I used to use a chart where I would say, okay, you've got success, survival, failure. And we would kind of walk through their journey, right? That prior to their kid getting sent away, there was some failure in the system. And not all the times, because not every treatment experience is great. But for the most part, as they come home from treatment, and most parents would tell me, yeah, I feel like, Mike, we were drowning. Now our head's above water.
Mm-hmm.
I go, I love that analogy. And I would agree with that analogy. I said, but is that where you want to stay? Do you want to stay just treading water and barely keeping your head above water? Or do you want to get out of the water, right? Do we want to be successful? And so we started to, I would ask them the questions. How did you go from failure to survival? How did you get your head out of the water? And they start listing all these amazing attributes and qualities that they did. And I said, look at what you just said. I said, did you see everything that you just listed? I go, that's exactly the same thing that it's going to take you to go from survival to success.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's make a plan, right? You know what it's going to take. Now let's make a plan to get you there. And so a lot of times, again, when that deep breath happens, because we are creatures of habit, as you know, and being in treatment has not erased these habits.
No.
And so if I don't consistently have that intentionality and focus and work, guess what happens? Actually, really quick.
Yeah.
We revert back to what we knew, what we know, and who we are.
Yeah.
And so to me, if you don't have that intentionality, you're just going to go back to what it was. So
yeah, I had two families come to mind. Two very opposite families. One, the planning was done, and there was work done on the transition. The thought of, okay, what needs to change when she comes home, and I found myself driving the whole thing. And afterwards, I'm the one pursuing this couple to talk about things, to make sure that we're following up and that there's follow through on the plan. And I was just scratching my head saying, it feels like I care more about how this turns out than they do.
right.
And
Yeah.
part of it was they're just sort of like afraid to, they're watching for the bad things that's going to happen, the bad choices or the depression setting in. And they're focusing on her instead of what's our plan, and what's our job and moving forward. The other family is a single mom that's coming to mind. And she was so intentional, and she was daily thinking about what she can do to follow through with the plan that she had put in place, to live out the values that she wants to live out the communication that she wants to keep open with her daughter. And they weathered the testing phase phenomenally. And it's because she was so ready to, step in. And I think about the metaphor of a 4x4 relay, and the parents are on that last leg, the most important leg. And, some of them get that baton and they know exactly what they're going to do with it, how they're going to take it, how they're going to carry it forward. And in other cases, they think, oh, the race is over, and they don't realize they have to do the next leg. So, well, Mike, what an amazing set of things you've shared with us today. I appreciate your wisdom, and maybe as much of that as that, I've always appreciated your heart and your humor. You just are fantastic resource to parents and to kids. You have a unique ability, I think, with both across the lifespan of these kids and also their parents. I think our parents will gain a lot from what you had to say today. Is there anything else you want to share with them as we wrap up this episode?
As you were talking, there's so many things that come to my mind as a kid comes home, right? The idea of trust, like where do we start with that? And just really, really quick, an analogy I would use is, parents have a rubber band on their arm. And if you flick that rubber band, it hurts, right? Well, the kids have that rubber band on as well, but they've been in treatment and they've done a lot more work. I hate to say it, but they've done more work than the parents have. And so many times the kids have taken off that rubber band and they've kind of moved on from it. Well, the parents haven't. And so when the kid gets home, the parents are closer to that pain, to those memories than the kid is. And I can't tell you how many kids have said, Mike, it feels like my parents are just waiting for me to screw up. And I'll tell parents, like, understand where you're at. I don't want to necessarily say it's always a trauma response, but I'm going to say that a lot of this that's happened is traumatic for the system. And so because the parents still have that rubber band on, or at least that pain of that rubber band, many times they see their kids through that lens, through that filter. And so when the kid even kind of makes a mistake, even a little bit, it's magnified, right? Yeah. Times 10. And so now the parent's response is a reaction, or sometimes an overreaction, and they're not seeing their son or daughter for who they are, right? And I'll tell parents, your sons and your daughters are so much more than the behavior. And if you can start to see them past the behavior, there's a function behind the behavior, and understand that sometimes your response or your overreaction, that's you, right? And so to help them understand and just know that's going to happen. That's going to happen. I've had that too many times from parents to say, man, they asked just to go do something. And my first thought is, well, the last time you did that, you got into drugs. I'm like, and they're like, but you know what? That was 9 months ago. That was a year ago. I can't keep seeing them that way. So again, as you were kind of talking about that transition, that was just something that popped into my head, because I think every parent experiences that at some level. And if they can't get through that or understand it, what happens is the kid's like, well, if that's how you see me, then guess what you're going to get? That's what you're going to get. And it's kind of weird, but I've talked to kids enough to where they're like, well, why wouldn't I? I mean, it's easier to go back to old habits versus trying to keep working. So that, I would say that would be my quote, kind of parting words.
Nice.
Because I think every parent will experience that on some level.
Definitely. Well, that's fantastic, Mike. I have a feeling we'll get you back up here and we'll talk some more, because the list of interests you have are long and good, and we need to get into it. So, but thank you for your time today.
Anytime. It's always fun to talk with my friend, Tim. So anytime you want to, I will be happy to do it.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.